Hi everyone. I know I mentioned in my last devlog that I wanted to space them out a bit more, but forget all that. I'm here with another update. I managed to get a lot done in the last 2 weeks, so I wanted to speak a little about the implementation of the new task system, the new character design, and the beginnings of what will eventually become the behavior attributes of the customers. Let's get into it. The first thing I changed was how I was implementing the task system. In my previous system, I created a task-based script which established the task name and description and contained a method for checking whether the task was complete. From here, I would create new scripts for each of the different task types and inherit the task-based script. I'd then have an event that would listen for when the conditions of that task were complete, and it was just a matter of creating an instance of that task in the task manager. This worked fine for simple tasks like making a number of sales or earning over a certain amount of money, but it was a nightmare to expand on to include specific objects. Every time I wanted to create a new task, I'd have to use a workaround. Instead, I looked at the idea of using scriptable objects. This is how I wanted to create the tasks in the first place, but the more I read about them, the less I understood about how I could use them in my project. Scriptable objects should only be used as read-only containers, and because tasks would start as incomplete and eventually switch to completed, I wouldn't be able to use them because the value wouldn't be maintained during builds. But I decided to test out a couple of scenarios, and after some trial and error, this is what I settled on. A class named task definition, which is a scriptable object. This is a container that holds the task name, task description, and the task-based class I was using before. Then, for each new task I want to add to my game, I'd create a separate task definition which inherits from the scriptable object class, allowing me to set the task type as well as any other variables I want to set in the inspector. This class also contains the logic for what type of task it is. The final script I have then is the actual task itself. In here, I have all the logic for task completion and the event that listens for when the task conditions are met. It's a more complicated process now than how it was working before, but it feels much more scalable and allows me to create all types of different tasks in my game. Now look, this is the little guy I've been using for the last few months. And he's great, really. It's probably the first 3D human model I've created that doesn't resemble a walking blobfish, but I made this guy to be a kid in another game that never came to life, so it was time to work on a new character.
It's one fine-looking barbecue pit. Why doesn't mine look like that?
Yeah, so if you couldn't tell, that was not my model. This was actually a time-lapse from Pixo3D's video, where I tried to learn skin modeling from it, but failed miserably. I'm starting to see why games are made by more than one person. I wish I had remembered this before I decided to work on a 3D project. Instead, I decided to seek the help of some professionals and turned to Fiverr for somebody who actually knows what human anatomy looks like. I came across Mehdi, who mentioned he could model simple toony characters, which if I'm not mistaken, is exactly what I need. I'd only used Fiverr a few times, so I was a bit apprehensive about the service. I wasn't sure what type of quality I'd get, but I was sure it was better than whatever I could do, so I took the chance. I had some rough sketches for what I wanted, a base character that I could swap the clothing or facial hair on to create a variety of different characters, so I sent this to Mehdi, and 3 days later, this is what he sent back. I was extremely happy with the finished product, so I'd recommend anyone who needs a similar model to check out Mehdi for his services. I gave the character a rig and then immediately tried importing him into Unity, where I was met with this. So I tidied up his rig, re-imported into Unity, fixed up his bone structure, and tested his muscle groups the only way I know how. I eventually want to add rig controls to the character's face so that I can show expressions, and I managed to add the controls in Blender, but I won't be creating these animations until later, as I'm not sure if it's better to animate normally or use blend shapes, so I'll read up more on that and come back later. I wanted to try add some character in my game. I mentioned before that I worked in retail for a long time, and while there I saw every type of person you can imagine. Some are quiet, some are rude, and some feel like they could mess up your whole day if you're not careful. To try capture some of that behavior in my game, I've given the customers gestures. So if the player decides to steal an item that a customer is holding, or that customer is hit with an object, they should act accordingly. Imagine browsing in a store and a manager came up and threw an item at you. I certainly wouldn't continue about my day like some oblivion NPC.
One of us is a killer, but who?
Eventually, I'll have a system in place that'll allow me to give personality to my customers, but for now, I've just set them to initiate a rude gesture to indicate their frustration. I tried adding animation to the character, but this is another thing I'm ultimately not very skilled at. I added a simple idle animation and watched this very good tutorial by Alex on Story on how to get a very nice walk cycle. I'll refine on these later, but for now, this is a good base to work with. Adding animations also introduced issues with the automatic weight assignment for the clothing, but if there's any aspect of game development I hate most, it's weight painting. It takes such a tremendous amount of effort to get it right, and even after spending more time than I care to admit on it, it still wasn't correct. So I cheated and increased the skin modifier on the model to hide the tears. And that's basically everything that I've gotten working in the last 2 weeks. I'm really happy now with the new task system and how it's been built out with scriptable objects. It feels a lot less restrictive than the system I had before. It should allow me to add a slightly more variety into the tasks that are available, and then that should help to break up the gameplay as well. The other thing I want to get done is the store expansion. So there's a variation of that in the game at the moment where if you have enough money, you can just simply move to the next room. But I do want to expand on this and give the player some choice to maybe, add a smaller room or a larger room, and then this will affect the items that they can place into the room. So that's another thing I want to get going forward. And the last thing, the main thing I want to do now is really to work on that base character that I got off Medi, who I mentioned earlier on. So the base character is basically going to be the main character for how I build the rest of the characters in the game. So I just want to change out the hair, the facial hair, the clothing, and this will essentially be the base for all of the characters going forward. So I really want to nail down the first character, and then I can expand and start adding new characters into the game and really make the shop feel alive. So there's some of the bigger things that I want to get going forward, but I also want to start working on the gameplay loop so I can try build the beginnings of the game and test how it feels to play so that I can work on that. So there's a lot to do still, but I just want to thank absolutely everyone who's tuned in so far and interacted with my videos. It's been a great inspiration for me to see that people are subscribing and that they enjoy the gameplay process. If there's any choice, any style that you want me to see or any ideas that you have for the game, don't be hesitant to leave a comment or leave a like or interact in any way. It really helps the channel. But for now, if you just want to subscribe, that would help me out greatly. So again, thanks to everybody who's tuned in so far, and I hope to have some more updates in the future. So I'll see you then. Thanks.